Well, hello and welcome. Thanks a lot for joining us for this week's panel conversation. We're going to hear from leaders in law enforcement about how community perspectives impact the delivery of local police services and what are the creative ways that these leaders have taken in their communities to ensure engagement and to help make sure that resident perspectives are being heard as well as managed and the delivery of local police services. My name is Matt Fulton and I'm the Vice President for National Engagement for a company called Polco. Our company actually works with communities around engagement and helping to track performance from a resident's perspective. And today we have an excellent panel assembled to share their perspectives on putting police needs and expectations in a community context. We're going to be talking about the challenges that law enforcement agencies are facing in understanding, managing, and responding to public safety needs of a community and those that they serve, particularly in today's disruptive environment. These kind of ideas and these kind of solutions that we'll hear today are things that maybe will be able to give you additional perspectives, a new idea, new approach, things that you might be able to use in your own communities or to just benefit from learning about how these departments are operating and maintaining public safety in your communities. Here's kind of how the day will flow. We're going to start off by doing some introductions of our panelists, and then we'll kick into asking 3 questions of the panelists. At the end, we'll give a little bit of time if they want to have any conversations with each other or bring up any topics that the conversation has helped to generate. And then we'll wrap it up. And generally, these take no more than an hour. And I'm just looking forward to the conversation. So if that's okay, let's kick into the introductions. Our first panelist is J.D. Younger, who was appointed as the Chief of Police for the city of Edmond, Oklahoma in 2017. Chief Younger's selection followed 23 years of service with the Norman Police Department, and he actually started his career in law enforcement after graduating from the University of Oklahoma under the Department of Justice Community-Oriented Policing Services hiring initiative. We all probably recognize it by calling it the COPS program. JD is a graduate of the FBI National Academy, the Senior Management Institute for Police, and the FBI Law Enforcement Executive Development Program. JD, I also really appreciated learning about your deep investment in your community, serving as a member of multiple nonprofit boards, including Big Brothers, Big Sisters, and United Way. Thanks, JD, for being here. And I would really welcome you to just add a little bit more flavor to your background.
Yeah, I think that just to clarify, most of my adult life, really most of my growing up is right here in Oklahoma. So my experiences and perspectives I'll share are from an Oklahoma kid. And so I think that's important in a country that's so big and culture kind of changes depending on what community you're in and what segment of the community you're in within that particular area. So I just like to say my background is here in Oklahoma, all the way through my formal education and through my law enforcement career. And so hopefully that gives you a little perspective on some of the comments I might offer later on in the discussion.
Well, that's great. I'm really looking forward to hearing that. But thanks for clarifying that. And thanks, JD, for being here. Chief Matthew Pinard was sworn in as Littleton's Chief of Police in 2018. Matt holds a Bachelor's of Science in Law Enforcement from Western New England College and a master's degree in Business Administration from Fitchburg State University. He started his career in his hometown of Ayer, this is in Massachusetts, with their police department as a reserve officer back in 1993. And he joined the Littleton department in 2002. So he's been in the department and provided leadership there for quite a while. He climbed through the ranks before becoming chief. Chief Pinard is a longtime motorcycle enthusiast, which is a really cool thing to hear about, and is assistant control chief of the NEMLEC Motor Unit, which is an elite motorcycle officers group. Matt aims to be a modern and progressive law enforcement leader, and since taking office in June of 2018, it's really cool to know that Chief Pinard has worked to have his police department accredited, and it sounds like it was just recently reaccredited. So, Matt, thank you for being here, and would love to hear a little bit more about your background. Oops, I'm sorry, you're on mute, Matt.
I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to add to that, but it's pretty funny, JD. I'm going to come off of your take there. I'm pretty new in my career as a chief of police, pretty progressive. A lot of changes we made within the department, getting accredited, a lot of policies that were overviewed. But I'm just a small town boy in a blue collar family that is now in a leadership role here in the next town over from where I grew up. So my population of the community that I'm serving is 10,000. The population I grew up in is just about 10, 12,000 now too. So I'm hoping to add to the conversation. I'm not sure if your agencies are a lot bigger than mine or if your cities are a lot bigger than mine, but we all have to have the same conversations, some on a smaller scale than others.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And I think it just really says a lot about your leadership just because of your accreditation process. I know that's a rigorous process, and having gone through it twice now, what a great accomplishment. So congratulations on that. Let me introduce Corey Falls. Corey was appointed as Deputy City Manager for the City of Gresham in 2019. Corey's responsibility includes overseeing police, fire, emergency management, and human resources. Prior to that, he served for 21 years in local law enforcement, with his last role as Superintendent of Public Safety for the City of Gresham. Corey has served as the Sheriff for Jackson County, Oregon as well. Corey's got a postmaster's degree in business, a master's degree in organizational management, and a bachelor's degree in health. Corey is also a graduate of the FBI National Academy and the Police Executive Research Forum Senior Management Institute program. Corey, thank you for joining us. And would you mind just sharing a little bit more about your background?
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Fulton. Thanks for having me here today. Just the only thing I would add to that, my experience is in Oregon and Washington, and have worked in different size agencies in police and sheriff's offices.
Yeah, you bring a varied background, and so I'm really excited to hear your perspectives, Corey. Thank you for taking an hour out of your day to be part of this conversation. Well, the topic we're going to explore today is putting police needs and expectations into a community context. I was a city manager for over 30 years in the Twin Cities area, and I always have recognized and appreciated the important role that public safety has played in a community, because it impacts every aspect of a community's overall success and quality of life. The complexities and the challenges that law enforcement agencies run into all of the time, all of the overlapping, ever-occurring challenges that are going on, require you to be able to provide leadership and to deliver the services that help make people safe and creates that quality of life in a community. And the expectations are high. If there are mistakes that are made in the area of law enforcement, so many times it has generational impacts on the community, and you're seeing that occur readily over the past couple of years and several years for sure. So you're consistently needing to adapt to changing environments, and the ways that you help to make sure that residents are included in that conversation and have an impact and have some involvement in the delivery of public safety services in the community become a really important topic, particularly now when everything is so disruptive. When you add on a pandemic, that only adds on to the challenges that you're all confronting. So the question then is, how do you go about the process of understanding needs and then being able to manage them and meet them in a manner that is performed with excellence, trust, accountability, and equity for everyone? The graph that you see on the slide right now, actually, it comes from a survey that we have done twice over in 2018 and 2020. It's called the National Police Services Survey. And the survey is really designed to help communities get an overall perspective of resident sentiment regarding police services and overall performance, which can help you align your decisions and inform your decisions. And I put this slide up because it shows a comparative shift in resident sentiment between 2018 and 2020. And, given all of the dynamics and all of the civil unrest that has occurred over the last couple of years, you would expect for there to be a shift in resident sentiment and resident trust in the delivery of police services. And that's reflected in where people's priorities are between the 2 years. It's really interesting, though, to point out that our research has shown that the areas that have actually increased in terms of overall priority are things that involve community, police neighborhood involvement, community problem solving, and areas where police departments will work with residents to actually create and identify and work through issues that are impacting on the community. It becomes a really important survey to really understand where the resident shifts are and where you might be able to realign resources or where you should be shifting resources to help meet some of the responsibilities of the community. And so that is kind of a cue in to the conversation about how you are handling these kind of issues in your communities. And we're going to be asking 3 questions. What role should the community play in guiding or influencing the delivery of local police services? What strategies do you use for managing those expectations? And then what tools and methods are you using to just simply understand where your residents are and what their priorities are regarding the delivery of local police services? And so with that, I'd like to kick into the first question and start with you, Chief Younger. Can you talk about the role the community should play in guiding or influencing the delivery of police services in Edmond?
Yeah, just a little bit of background on Edmond. We're 100,000 population. We are a rim city for Oklahoma City, which is the 25th largest city in the country. But we are suburban in structure, higher median income, higher educational attainment than comparable communities in Oklahoma. So that's just a little bit of our background as a city. I personally subscribe to, and our community subscribes to, the community policing philosophy, which at the end of the day is really just about partnerships and problem solving. And so the role that we believe the community should play is a very prominent and centered role. The service that the police department delivers is not too different than the service the public works department delivers or any other department of the city. The city is an organization set to serve the citizens. The police department is just one part of that organization. And so to serve a community, you need to understand what that community expects. And so we try to access that kind of information and feedback in multiple areas. Of course, our first formal feedback loop is through the city council. We have a council manager form of government. And so I actually work for the city manager. He works for the city council. They are elected representatives of the people. And so in a formal capacity, we look to them for kind of guidance on what their priorities might be, how their perspectives on delivery specifically of services from the police department. But our city also enacted an ordinance in 1997, creating a community-oriented policing leadership council. And I would ask the people watching this to think of that kind of like an advisory board. And by ordinance, that board is tasked with working with the police department to identify policing priorities within the community, and then to talk about how we go about acquiring the resources necessary to meet the expectations associated with those priorities. On a more informal level, being a community policing oriented agency, we use several informal opportunities to kind of meet with people, coffee with a cop, neighborhood night out, the things that are probably pretty prevalent in a lot of communities across the country. We use Citizens Police Academy and have for the last 24 years. We run that twice a year. And I tell the people on the first night when I get to present in that class, hey, we couch this as a, why don't you come to us and let us teach you something? But really we use it as a mechanism to engage our citizens to get an understanding of really what they're expecting of us and how they want us to deliver services. Because at the end of the day, it's not what your members of your police department think is best. It's what your community expects. And then they provide the resources to address that. So community should be the focal point of setting expectations, and you should be working with them to figure out how you're going to achieve them.
That's great. People may have an interest in learning a little bit more about your leadership council. How many people are on the council, and who comprises the council?
It's 11 members that are on the council, all appointed by council. So I think we have 4 council wards, and we have a mayor. So we have 5 people on our council. So on that COPLC, which is the acronym, cops love acronyms. So our Community Oriented Policing Leadership Council, there are 4 appointed, 1 by each of our council members, and then I believe 7 appointed by the mayor. They serve 3-year terms, and can serve up to 3 of those. So they could serve 9 years maximum. They rarely do. So we have a few that have been around that long, but others, because they are citizens and tend to have jobs and other family commitments, they will usually do 1 or 2 terms. So it's been a good thing for us.
Yeah, that's great. Congratulations on that. And your police academy, although there's a lot of communities that use police academies, I always kind of suggest that those become then your alumni club, and they have an understanding about the work that you do. They're better connected to you as an operational function in the community, and become pretty good allies in the community as well. So
They do.
I like that devious way that you're actually learning from them.
Yeah, we have a very engaged alumni club that sponsors an annual golf tournament. They use that fund to put on a banquet, kind of a recognition ceremony at the end of the year, which again is just another opportunity for officers and the citizens they serve to be in a room where we're not having to do law enforcement. We get to talk about each other's kids, families. You build a personal relationship, and then from that, we can have the deeper discussions about the services they're expecting.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Thanks so much. Chief Pinard, can you talk about the role that the community should play in guiding and influencing police services in your community?
Yeah, of course I can. It's pretty funny. Like I said, we are a very small community. You know, we're 1/10 the size of JD's community. So for us, we're very intimate within the community. A lot of the officers that are here working actually coach, and they're more involved. The communities drive us to how they want to be policed. We don't tell them how they're going to be policed. And with the intimate relationship that we have between our school resource officers, between the coffee with the cops, between the different policies and procedures that we put forward, those are what we put forward to the select board. And the select board, made of civilians that are voted in, actually are the ones that approve our policy and procedures. Now, granted, a lot of it's already, boilerplate for accreditation, but we have to make sure it's adhered to in our community and how it's going to go forward for our community and how it's going to work. A lot of the engagement that we do is very personal. And one of the things that we strive upon is we have a very long FTO program. And part of that FTO program, we have the officers with the FTO, with the field training officer itself. They actually meet at every single school. They meet all the principals, they meet the deans. They actually go to a select board meeting. They're publicly promoted and sworn into the position so that it's on cable network television and people actually see who it is that we're hiring. They then have to attend several nonprofits within town that same training period, as well as they have to give a written verbatim back to at least 10 different business owners that they talk to and learn about the different businesses in town. Littleton is a crossroads for the state, which is Route 495 and Route 2. We're right in the middle of it. So we have a lot of transient traffic that comes through here. So we do need to serve that aspect of law enforcement. However, being a small community, being involved more in the community itself is where we actually get our feedback from them. So that's it in a nutshell for Littleton.
That's great that you really do just fully engage your department in the community through kind of all your actions that you're doing, and that's excellent. Does your community have you go through an annual strategic planning process, and does the community get involved in that conversation very much?
So we do. We actually just did a strategic plan for the department a few years back, and we put a feeler out to the community to have them fill the survey out to see how it would come back to them and how we're doing. And we actually utilized all that feedback and changed a lot of things within the department that was actually easier for us to get accredited and easier for us to police the community. So that going forward, I think in another few more years, we'll have to do another strategic plan and put another survey out to the community. But the benefit of having a select board of 5 members that I work directly for is pretty neat within itself. They're elected, So the community elects these 5 people, and these 5 people that are on the board are the ones that are driving our policy and procedures throughout the community. And they're also the ones that are driving us to have those critical conversations with the people in town. You know, COVID's kind of set us back a little bit on some of the community policing events we do on a regular basis. You know, one day a month we put on a whole veterans breakfast at the senior center, and you know, we probably have 30 or 40 veterans that actually come down and have breakfast once a month.
Very cool.
We haven't been able to do any of that. You know, the coffee with a cop, that was a once a month thing as well, and we haven't been able to do that because no one wants to come in. So we're hoping to get the vaccine out there and move on to get back to a little bit of normalcy in our lives, to tell you the truth.
Are your selectmen still meeting virtually, or are they back in person?
They actually went back in person somewhat due to some contractual issues that need to be discussed in person on executive session, but they're going to be back in session starting Monday as Massachusetts is opening up fully.
It's starting to renormalize a little bit, right?
A little bit.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate that. Corey, can you talk about what role the community plays in guiding the delivery of police services in Gresham?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Fulton. And my job is going to be easy today if I get to follow the 2 police chiefs, because I think what they said are spot on. I'll add a little bit to that as best I can. Just to note a little bit about our community. It sounds like very similar to Chief Younger. We're just a tad over 100,000 population. We're on the east border of the city of Portland in the Portland metropolitan area. And that's our location right now. The dichotomy with that is, as you probably see from the news, is Portland is a pretty progressive liberal place, and Gresham is not. So that is interesting being in the same county there. But yeah, to address your question, and I will just try to complement or add to what the chiefs have already said, is when it comes to the role the community plays. A chief mentor of mine always said, you know, you police a community based on the community values, and that's how you move forward. And what I would like to add is, and Chief Younger mentioned it too, is just how are you doing your problem solving? And I think it comes down to two elements in a community to get their input. You have to understand crime in your community and harm. And what I mean by that, if I'm sure we've all looked at data in our communities and we've seen the data that shows, man, this neighborhood has a lot of crime. So you hold a community meeting in that neighborhood thinking that you're going to talk about crime, and community members say, you know, what concerns me is there's kids in this neighborhood and the speeders going up and down. And there's different elements of how the community feels. And it's like, in this area, they don't feel safe because of traffic issues, but the data shows there's crime. Then you'll go across town to a different community and you'll hear the opposite. There'll be very low crime, but people feel harm for whatever reason. And it could be because of just the makeup of the community. It could be because of abandoned vehicles or different social issues that arise in that neighborhood that make people feel unsafe. So the role of community and law enforcement as cities is to, one, understand what the concerns are. What are they, so you can meet those expectations, so you can educate your community, and it comes down to problem solving. I like all the community engagement activities, and we do a lot of similar things that I've heard today in terms of coffee with a cop and showing up to community events. We're not there. We're not quite there yet, but I would like to see us dig a little deeper. I think showing up to the community events and coffee with a cop are very important to engage your community, to build relationships. But I think we need to really hone in on how are we problem solving. And to me, the best time to do coffee with a cop is when you have a bad incident or you have something in a community that you want to address, or you pair your community engagement with with the data that shows where your problems are. And you end up in those communities and you have open discussions about what is happening to address the harm that is happening in the community or the crime. And you have the people that are the people that are impacted the most by whatever the community problem is, you get them part of that discussion.
That's great. I'm glad you brought up the kind of the idea of policing should be based on community values, because I think that is such sound advice. And given the fact that we've just come through this pandemic and all of this civil unrest, I mean, our research has shown, Corey, about just the shifts in priorities and needs and expectations, just because everybody's life's been kind of thrown up in the air and they're now kind of coming down and into kind of a new normalcy. And as you're entering into this new ARPA, the American Rescue Plan process, have you gone about a process in your police department or in your community on just kind of identifying what those new priority areas are and what the new expectations are, so that you can really truly understand what those values are?
We're not quite there yet.
Okay.
We're not yet. No, I think that's a good suggestion to understand some of the changes in our community, because there's new needs and there's new expectations now based on the pandemic. So we're not that far ahead yet, and I think that is certainly something we need to look at, though.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Chief Pinard, can you talk about the strategies that you're using for managing community expectations in Littleton?
Yeah, of course. It was funny, Corey, you said something about harms and knowing the community and what they're thinking of for harms. And I'm going to think back to when I first became a police officer, and it was, you're in the locker room on Friday night and you're posting the stats for the week and who had the most arrests, and, the zero tolerance policy that we all looked at. And we thought it was going to be the big change of the drug addiction and everything else. And it's taken a full circle all the way around. And one of the programs that we brought into Littleton was it's called C4RJ, Communities for Restorative Justice. And my chief and I, when I first got hired, were told by the DA they didn't want it. And it was due to the fact that the DA at the time wanted their numbers in court to be up. Well, I think if we all look back at our communities weren't being served very well by that happening. So we needed to look at something a little different. And, I give him a lot of credit. He gave the ball to me and let me run with it. And we started the program C4RJ, and we're into our 10th year with it now. Now have buy-in from the DA's office. We're nationally, let alone just regionally. But it's righting the wrongs. It's keeping these frivolous crimes where we thought we were doing the right thing by bringing them to court, and we're actually forming a circle and having them talk about the issues at hand and coming up with some kind of outcome that we're going to deem necessary for that harm that was wrong, the crime that was done, enacted. But we really have to have your finger on the pulse in a small community. And if you don't have your finger on the pulse, if you're not, meeting the people, if you're not listening to what they're saying, then you really can't control a small town. Where a big city may have an officer that handles just B&E calls, every officer has to handle their own call here. They'll do a motor vehicle stops at one end, and then they'll be doing crime scene processing at the other. So it's just getting out there and trying to make sure that people know who we are.
Chief, I think that one of the advantages of being in a smaller community, a lot of times engagement is really based upon, government generally operates on the basis of trust, right? And trust comes from building those relationships on a personal level, so that people not only understand what you do in your responsibilities in delivering public safety or any municipal service for that matter, but if they don't have that connection, then the exposure or the potential for things falling off the rails becomes even greater. And so I'd love to hear your perspective on just what I just said in the context of how you deliver your services, and because a lot of times people expect for problems to be fixed overnight, right? But if they have got a better understanding about how you operate and how problems are resolved, and love to hear your thoughts and react to that comment.
Matt, the big push from a very, very minute group in our town is for body cameras right now. And my whole, and I'm all for it. And if that's the way the whole community wants us to go, my entire department's all bought into it. We'll go that way. But my thought on that is, if I'm putting body cameras on my department, then our community is not trusting us. And if we don't have trust within that community and what we have here, then we can't police them properly. And trying to break down that non-trust, it's a tough barrier to break down. Some people, you'll just never ever get them to trust the police. And even though we do everything we possibly can, but yes, you're correct. Though a small community with the trust that we have, we make it work.
Yeah, I hear a lot about just building up this community capital, which is really that trust factor in the community. So appreciate that perspective. Thank you very much for that perspective. Corey, can you talk about the strategies that you're using for managing community expectations in Gresham?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Fulton. When I saw this question, I thought, man, if we as either or former sheriffs or chiefs or current chiefs had this question figured out, we'd probably all last a lot longer.
Yeah.
A couple of things when I was looking at this question that came to mind is one, there's got to be a level of transparency, and two, when it comes to managing community expectations, you have to understand what those expectations are. And I've seen a lot of communities never ask their community what they really think, and they just say we're doing a great job. And that doesn't always match up if you're not really hearing or setting up strategies to hear from your community. So number one, and Chief Younger alluded to this too when he just talked about the government structure and the council and the different elements that make up a city infrastructure. One is having avenues that are transparent where you're able to hear from your community and the most impacted people in your community. And outside, there's always going to be community members that have the ear of the council, the ear of the mayor, the ear of influential people. And I think that is important to listen. But there's also the community members that they don't necessarily have a voice, or they're not going to show up to your evening council meeting, or they don't have the same communication capabilities that everybody else does. But you have to figure out how to communicate with all your community members. And those are some of the things that we're trying to do. I guess I'm talking about the scary word of equity. People, you start saying equity and it's like, oh my gosh, there's, what do you mean by that? But it's how do we hear from all our community members so we understand what those expectations are? And we're trying to set up some different programs to have more of an equitable lens to, like, who are our community members that we need to hear from. In one of our neighborhoods in Gresham, because it's right on the border of Portland and Gresham, we have 70 different languages that are spoken. And it's significant to understand. Now a lot of community members, they're just not going to come forward and speak. So we're trying to figure out different ways to communicate, different ways to connect with our community, to learn what those expectations are. And that's our drive right now.
What I hear a lot, Corey, and please respond to this. Police departments they're being impacted by the noise of a community. I used to manage a community directly adjacent to Brooklyn Center. And so as you look at the Brooklyn Center voices that are talking about that community, it kind of points into your conversation that you're not really hearing from the community overall to get a broad understanding about what the community issues are. You're hearing from a subset. And so this question about what is the truth, what are the real facts that are driving or impacting on police services? Because that impacts directly on your ability to manage expectations and to manage how would you react to that?
Well, I think you're spot on. And I don't think it's only just the noise of the community, but it's the noise of the politics. It's the noise of the social justice movement that's going on right now. It's the noise of our greater metropolitan area that impacts our elected officials, that impacts our police department. Because in our police department, a lot of comments will be like, those things don't happen here. And that's difficult for them to grasp when there's this national conversation going on about policing in different communities. So yeah, this is the difficult dichotomy that I believe a lot of chiefs are dealing with, and myself and public safety is trying to identify who our community members are, what are their issues, and what are the appropriate resources and problem-solving efforts we can to address that.
Yeah, thank you for that. And that's exactly the reason for having these kind of conversations, is so that other departments can learn from other departments about how are you dealing with that issue? How are you reacting to those kind of community characteristics and impacts? So thank you very much for that. Appreciate that. Chief Younger, can you talk about what strategies you're using in Edmond to help manage community expectations?
Yeah, I'd love to offer my input. First, let me just give some recognition to Corey. I love that you point out the fact that a strategy is typically developed to address the majority of the community, and that we have to recognize there are those members of the community, they don't go to council meetings. They're not on the department Facebook page. There may be a mistrust of government in general and law enforcement specifically. And for us as government servants to discount or not recognize that and specifically try to still get to those opinions and those expectations, I think it's probably a catalyst for some of the issues we're seeing today. People that have for so long have been marginalized or felt marginalized are saying no more. I want my voice heard. And so I want to pat Corey on the back for bringing that up. And I also like your comments about, I think as government officials, we have to recognize there's community expectations, the aggregate, and then there's a citizen expectation or a community member expectation. And those things aren't always the same. And so we have to, what are we doing to hear both of those, given the appropriate weight to both of those, and then coming up with, again, a service model that meets what we think the community, the aggregate or collective is willing to accept or really wants. And so some of our strategies, they're pretty mundane. We use a survey mechanism in my community. And so what used to be NRC, which I think Paulco acquired at some point. So we use your services, and we do two different surveys in our community. We do an external survey of community expectations, interests, areas of concern. And we do that biannually, so every 2 years. And then we do an internal survey of all of our employees for the city that they don't ask the exact same questions, but there is some common crossover there dealing with, how safe do you feel in the community? What do you think our priorities should be as a community? What are your biggest concerns as a community? And so we have those two formal mechanisms, which are great. And they do give you some data. And after doing them for several years, you can look at trend lines. I'm not a big proponent of taking a snapshot of 1 year and telling you, well, that's it. That's the community's opinion. I do like looking at trend lines. And so you can kind of see, hey, where are we moving on this? And that's a big one for me as a chief executive. I want to see that formal statement, but I also understand data, and I understand rate of return and how few citizens really are getting surveyed on those things. So I don't think you can put all of your eggs in that basket. That's why I think you have to have those informal things that we talked about earlier for engaging the community and hearing their feedback. And I have to think, especially in the police department, for Matt and I, we constantly have to be looking at who's not at the table. Who do we know is in our community that we're not regularly getting to see or hear from? And then we have to be purposeful in seeing what options we have to engage that segment. Again, and I'm not saying, hey, let's go find the one person that has the one-off opinion and let's do what they say. But I am saying let's find that person and factor that in to our understanding of community expectations. So as far as formal strategies, like I said, we use our surveys for that. And then my particular community, I think we've pretty much committed to over communicating. And I think as a government, you have to do that. And that's, again, put the expectations in writing so people know what you're trying to address, and then give continual feedback on what you've done to address it. So if a road problem is the issue, let's write that the road problem is the issue, and then let's talk about the resources and actions we're taking to address it. And then the outcomes will be what the outcomes are. And we can always adjust strategy for getting a better outcome. But people need to know, you heard what they said, you've applied appropriate resources, and then hopefully there is a positive outcome, and let's over communicate that as well. So people build trust because they see, oh, my issue was identified, resources were applied, an outcome was communicated. Well, that's one in the positive bank. And now let's do another one.
Yeah, I love your, all of you kind of talked about this notion of transparent engagement. And I'm glad that our tools are working well for you. I'm a firm believer that data can help departments cut through the noise. And if you can have honest conversations, present honest information, people will accept that and recognize that as honesty, and will build on to trust in the community and in the services that are delivered. You've got the added advantage of having those connections through your academies and through your council. And so taking advantage of those opportunities, I'm sure, help as well. But totally appreciate the transparent engagement aspect of and accountability that you're promoting and accomplishing in the community. So thank you. Let us go on to the third question. Corey, can you talk about the tools and methods that you're using to understand resident expectations and priorities regarding police services in Gresham?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Fulton. One of the tools I want to use is a community survey. We have not done that, and we have not been very well at that. So I would like to hit up Chief Younger for his survey sometime maybe, or Chief Pinard if you have one. I've been looking for those types of tools, and I think that's a good tool. But to add to the tools and methods to understand community expectations, I'm a data-driven nerd. That's probably why they liked me and in city management a little bit, is understanding that. And I talk about three significant data points. Number one is just your quantitative data of your calls for service, your crime data. What is going on? What are the numbers saying? Number two is, what is your community saying through community meetings, through our Citizens Academy? And number three, what are the officers on the street that are handling these calls and addressing the problems? What are they seeing? What are they seeing? And I think it's taken the accumulation of that information and understanding what the expectations and priorities are based on that information to specifically identify what problems need to be addressed or solved, or what is the appropriate police service to address that. And I've noticed a little bit just since I've moved out, just in the last couple of years, it's been a combination of me moving out of law enforcement, the social justice movement, all the things that we're watching play out nationally, of this narrative changing a little bit from law enforcement to community safety or public safety. And to me, that's, what are the appropriate, is it a police response or is it a social service response? Is it a mental health issue? Is it a drug issue? Is it something that we need a different looking response at? And we're looking at some of those different methods right now. On the flip side, because I have my left foot in the fire a little bit, we're starting to add nurses to our emergency response, because what we're seeing is a lot of community members are calling the fire department when it's a medical need that a nurse can address, and it's cutting down on the amount of follow-up, the response, and all of that. So just, we've put together a mental health team for our police officers and are responding to that. but it's understanding the data, it's understanding what the calls for service are and what those expectations are, and then getting the right resource identified to address it.
I love the way that you really have identified the reality of how complex some issues that you're dealing with are. And so it's the combination of the way that you're looking at the quantitative data, the values of your community, and the people who are working the street. All of those aspects, I agree, need to come together in some manner to help you understand strategically where to go. And I do appreciate the fact that you're data driven.
Well, let me add something, Mr. Fulton. Is I don't want to fool anybody. These are the things conceptually we're looking at. I'm not saying we're doing all these things. I don't want to make it sound greater than we are. I'm talking more conceptually right here. This is the place we're trying to get and the things we're trying to look at.
Thank you. I appreciate that totally. But it also, I think the reason I was bringing it up, Corey, was just because it's important for those that are looking at or watching this this panel conversation to appreciate that there are a lot of complex issues, and it really calls to the attention of the importance of working within your community and throughout your community with all voices to help just work together on solving the problems. And it's a huge challenge. I mean, engagement has always been difficult. And so finding ways to meaningfully connect in an authentic and trusting way is an aspiring goal, I think, for most communities. And so I really appreciate the work that you're doing in Gresham for sure. Chief Younger, can you talk about the tools and methods that you're using to understand resident expectations and priorities regarding local police services?
Yeah, I can, but let me echo Corey's, and I saw Matt shaking his head too. A lot of the stuff that we're talking about, while we are doing it, I'm not saying we're not, it's aspirational. We're talking about what we're trying to do. I'm sure, I'm confident if you went and got 100 citizens from my community, the majority of them would tell you, yeah, we're doing those things. But I know for a fact there's a percentage that would say they don't do that. And so we are aspiring to meet these, lofty goals for all citizens. And so we laugh at it because it's true. But for those that watch this, hey, know that we don't have the problem solved. Like Corey said, if we did, we'd be putting it in a book and selling it. We're working with our community members to do the best we can for each individual we come in contact with. And as how we're doing that, I think similar to what was mentioned there, we try to look at quantitative type of stuff. I'm a data nerd as well. I love being able to use numbers to prove my point. But at the end of the day, we understand that the qualitative is really what is driving the message. And that is, does the citizen feel served? Do they feel like their expectations are heard and being met? And so you have to have mechanisms for doing that as well. And we started off the conversation talking about our engagement activities. And I agree with some of the comments that were offered. Those are great. Coffee with a Cop is great. But we recognize those are also superficial at a lot of times and kind of topical. And so we do talk to our members in the police department about developing a relationship. And so on the anniversary of George Floyd's death, I think the biggest example of that I know is when a George Floyd incident happens, do you have someone that doesn't look like you that will call you and ask you a question or will call and ask your opinion? That's telling you, oh, there's a connection there. That's the kind of feedback we're looking for. I'll get the data. I have the surveys. We'll continue to do that, and that's great. But we want you to engage with the citizens in our community. And while my number one job is to understand expectations of the community and communicate those to the members of my department and to explain to my community members the resources I have to meet those expectations and then work to fill any gaps on either side, I get my expectations from my members. The 100 people in blue uniforms are going out every day interacting with citizens. And so we try to build a culture where they can come back and share with us, hey, this is what I'm seeing, this is what I'm hearing. We also try to communicate to them, and I think we're fairly successful in letting them know that the city of Edmond largely exists because people want their kids to attend 3 of the top high schools in the state, and they want them to be safe when they're doing it. And so our job is to do that. Work with the community to make sure kids are safe and that their school environment is safe. And everything else kind of trickles out of that. So again, I think as far as strategies and tools that we use, we try to listen to our community members. We use the survey data, but we really want to listen to our officers. Hey, what are you experiencing? What are you hearing? And how do we incorporate that into our response?
Chief, I really appreciated you bringing it up earlier, and now just paying attention to the internal wellness of your police officers and the value that they bring in the work that they do, because that is such a critical thing. And I would like to just point out that research that I shared a little bit earlier showed that school safety and security was and continues to be the nation's highest priority if you ask residents about where their priorities are. And so I think you're spot on in terms of your focus in the community. So thank you so much for that.
And Matt, in all the survey data that I look at, just to pat y'all on the back, that's the one area where I don't see really wide deviation based on racial or ethnic affiliation. When you ask people about their kids, and when you ask people about their education, and when you ask people about their family safety, that doesn't matter what you look like. That doesn't matter what party you vote for. That is the core of really what people want.
Very well said. Thank you. Chief Pinard, can you talk about the tools and methods that you are using in Littleton to understand resident expectations and priorities?
Actually, no, I can't. JD and Corey hit it on the head. They knocked it out of the park. I'm going to echo a lot of the same. The one thing I am going to follow up on, though, Matt, is, and JD, you touched upon this a little bit, and we as administrators that are going to these council meetings, that are going to these planning board meetings, that are at these nightly meetings for new companies coming to town, we hear what they're looking for and what they want out of us. But I think sometimes in translation, passing the communication down to the officers and getting their take to get them to buy in to what the community is actually looking for. I'm doing everything I can as an administrator for the community and for the department to make sure that the communication lines are open, but I need to have buy-in from not only the community, but also the officers, and putting them together so that it's clear and concise as to what the community is looking for, and that it's being communicated back to them properly. Yes, do we have the survey? We did one a while ago. Are we going off of that? Yes, we are. Do we listen to the different community groups of Coffee with the Cops? Yes, we do that. Are there other ways for us to get out there, get out of the police cruiser, walk around a little bit, talk to the different people? My SRO is one of the biggest voices for our department. He's in all 4 of the schools every single day. He has meetings with parent groups on a regular basis, as well as administrative groups within the schools. And it's funny, and I think you touched upon this, Corey, you get that small percentage that has a squeaky wheel, and you're not sure if you can actually get towards it to get that right communication back to your guys. And are we bending over backwards for that 2% population that's loud within the department, or the 2% that's loud within the community? Do we always bend over backwards because they're the ones that are the loudest? I guess you can say we probably do. So, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the challenge that presents. And it ties us back into, I mean, you've got so many interactions going on with the community that you have a pretty good sense of what's going on in the community, either directly or through your officers. And so you've got a variety of different tools at your disposal for getting that input. But I think what you're pointing out is how a lot of communities are run, and that is you listen to the loudest. And the challenge is, of course, making sure that you're getting the voice of the community so that you have a better sense for where those community values are. And I don't know if you have any response to that, Chief, at all, or things that you're doing creatively in the community to get that broader voice.
Yeah, it's trying to get that community involvement, and like I said, we are doing the things that we need to do. One of the things for the buy-in part of the department is I'm trying to pawn off more of the administrative roles to my sergeants, to have them attend some of these meetings as well. Not just because I'm getting out of work. I'm trying to get them to see, I want to have my sergeants, if something were to happen to me, be able to step right into my shoes and say, okay, I got it, Chief. Don't worry about it. You're fine. I know what the community says. I want all of my sergeants to know the same exact thing that's going on, so there's no miscommunication between them as second line supervisors for me. That's one of the biggest things I see a challenge for a small department is it goes from chief, deputy chief to 5 sergeants. And it's challenging because you want all of your officers to be able to step into your shoes and do your job. But getting them to understand the way you think and how you see running your department, that you want them to look at and to have buy-in for it.
Yeah, thank you. Do any of you have any kind of follow-up comments or questions or issues you want to bring up? Let me do this. Let me share my screen one more time and we'll kind of wrap things up. This has been a really good conversation because I think that all of you are doing such great work in engaging with your community and aspiring to get the overall community voice so that you can incorporate those into understanding expectations, priorities, and all of those kinds of things. I did love the term transparent engagement because I think that is such an important part in just building trust within the community and the different ways that you're accomplishing that. There's a lot of universal truths in what the services that any size community delivers, and the way you deliver it may vary just because of your size and your geography. And so thanks for all of that. It certainly is inspiring to me to hear what you're doing and for all of the great work that you're accomplishing in your communities. It's a challenge, and you have such a prominent leadership role in the community that building community quality of life through everything that you do is stuff that it's been nice to hear how you're tackling that problem and accomplishing it in your own communities and aspiring to do things even better down the road. So thank you for that. Let's kind of wrap up the conversation. I will follow up with all of you and get you information on contact information for each of you so that you can connect with each other if you like. I do these conversations every week, and the best part for me is I get to meet 3 great new people on a weekly basis and learn about what you're doing cool in your communities. And if you know of anyone that you think would be good or would be interested in participating in a panel, by all means, send them my way. I'd love to incorporate their ideas as well and their thoughts. We take these conversations, we will package these up into highlight segments that we will publish probably within a week on LinkedIn. And because we want to share these ideas, we'd love for you to share them on your LinkedIn channels so that other people who trust your opinions and respect your ideas can hear from you directly. And that's the real value that we get out of putting these sessions together. I'm going to be contacting each of you as well, just to get some feedback. Always love to learn how I might be able to do this better. It's always a challenge for me too. I want to always improve on making this an effective way to share ideas and perspectives. And so any thoughts that you have, I would greatly appreciate it. Let me just thank you for the time that you spent. I've really enjoyed this conversation and learning from all of you. And I hope you've each picked up something from each other and have created kind of new connections now in the law enforcement world. But just really appreciate you spending the time with me.
Thank you. And thank you, Chiefs.
Thank you. Good spending time together.
Best of luck with everything that you're all doing.